There are two things that I hear website providers complain about all the time. This includes website developers, designers, agencies, solopreneurs, freelancers, and that is how hard it is to estimate projects precisely for the best return on your investment and how to stop scope creep, how impossible that feels. But here's the secret that most people don't know. Both problems can be addressed and potentially solved with a project brief before you send the proposal. And no, I'm not talking about some massive document that takes hours and hours, including all your requirements. With AI, this takes about 10 minutes. I'm going to show you why this one step will change how you estimate and plan projects, what makes a good project brief, and how to create one so fast you'll wonder why you weren't doing this before. So let's get started. Look, I know what you're thinking. Another document? Really? I'm already drowning in paperwork. But stick with me here because this one tactic, this one document is going to save your butt more times than you'll be able to count. I know it has for me. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you that these video trainings are brought to you by Project Management for Profit, where we teach website providers how to deliver projects on time, within budget, with the features that meet the client's business requirements without sacrificing profit. You can find us at pmforprofit.com, and we have lots of free resources you can download over there. There'll be a link below this video and in the pinned comment. Now let's get on with 10 reasons you should be using a project brief. Now, the first one is to validate the details with your client before you're committed. Now, this one is huge. You get to go back to the client and say, hey, based on our conversation, here's what I understood. Did I get this right? And guess what? Half the time they're going to say, oh no, that's not quite what I meant. It's better to find that out now before you've written a proposal and definitely before you've signed a contract. This is your first line of defense against scope creep, and it starts on day one, not 3 weeks into the project when the client says, but I thought we agreed, ... The second one is that it creates your visual sitemap, which you're going to need for estimating. You can't estimate content activities if you don't know what pages you're building, right? The project brief gives you all the information you need to create that visual sitemap, and you can do that with AI, which then becomes the foundation for estimating how much you'll spend on content collection, creation, and migration. Without this step, you're basically throwing darts at a board while blindfolded. Your project brief also becomes the foundation for your proposal. Instead of staring at a blank screen, wondering how to start your proposal, or trying to fill in your topic headings in your proposal with all the random notes you collected in that meeting, you've already got everything documented in the project brief. And if you validated it with the client, you've got it even more refined. The goals, the target audience, the key features, the timeline expectations, it's all there. You're not writing the proposal from scratch. You're building it from solid information you've already gathered and validated. This alone is going to cut your proposal time in half, I promise you. The fourth reason that website professionals always use a project brief is that it surfaces those red flags before you're emotionally invested in the project. Sometimes during the project brief creation, you'll realize things like, this client has champagne taste on a beer budget, or they want to launch in 3 weeks for a project that needs 3 months, or they can't articulate what they really want. The project brief helps you spot these issues early when you can still walk away gracefully instead of 3 months in when you're really ready to pull your hair out. The next reason is that it creates a single source of truth. How many times have you been in the middle of a project and thought, wait, what did they say they wanted on this particular page or that page? With a project brief, you've got one document that captures everything from your pre-proposal conversation. There's no more digging through email chains or trying to remember what was said in that meeting 2 months ago. And you validated it with the client, so it is indeed a single source of truth. The project brief also makes you look like a total professional. When you send a detailed project brief to a potential client and ask them to review it, you immediately separate yourself from the competition. So while other website providers are firing off quick proposals with fingers crossed, you're demonstrating that you actually listened, understood their needs, and have a systematic process. Clients notice this stuff, especially the good ones who are willing to pay premium prices. It also speeds up the actual proposal process. I already mentioned this, but it bears repeating because it's such a time saver. When all the details are already documented and validated, you're not starting from scratch. You're working from a solid foundation, which means you can get that proposal out faster, and speed matters when you're competing for clients. Another big advantage of the project brief is that it helps you identify what you don't know yet. If you've been following me anytime at all, you know that I'm always saying, do not estimate what you do not know. So this is going to help you identify those things. When you create the project brief, it often reveals gaps in your understanding. Maybe you realize you didn't know who their target audience really is, or you're unclear on their content migration needs, or you have no idea what third-party integrations they need. Now you can ask those questions before the proposal, not after. The project brief also sets expectations about your process. This is super important when you're first starting out with a new client. You got to set those proper expectations, and this does a great job of that. When you send a project brief for validation, you're training the client that you have a process and that you follow it. This sets the tone for the entire project. They learn early that you're organized, thorough, and professional, and that working with you means following a system, not just winging it. And then finally, it becomes project documentation if you win the work. Once they sign the contract, that project brief doesn't go in a drawer somewhere. It becomes part of your project documentation. Your team can reference it, you can use it in discovery sessions, and it serves as a baseline for what was agreed upon. If the project changes, and it will, you've got a clear record of where you started. The bottom line is this: creating a project brief might feel like extra work up front, but it's actually the thing that prevents you from doing extra work later. It's the difference between starting a project with clarity and confidence versus starting it with crossed fingers and a vague sense of dread. And here's the best part: with AI, creating this brief takes about as long as it takes to make a cup of coffee. So really, you have no excuse not to do it. So now that I've convinced you that a project brief is really necessary and extremely useful when planning your projects and estimating your projects, let's look at what is typically included in a project brief. Now, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly in the interest of time so that we can get to the demo, which is what I know you're waiting to see, is how easy this really is. So a project brief typically includes first a project overview, a high-level summary in 2 to 3 sentences that captures what you're building and why. So think of this as like the elevator pitch that anyone glancing at the brief can quickly understand. Then you're going to want to describe the current situation. What exists today? Their current website, system pain points, and any relevant metrics like traffic or users. This gives context for why they need this project and what problems you're solving. Next is project goals. List the specific outcomes the client wants to achieve with this project. These should be measurable business goals, not features. Things like reduce support emails or handle 3 times more students. Then the next section is your target audience. Describe who will actually be using this website with enough detail that it influences design and feature decisions. You want to include demographics, tech comfort level, and what they're trying to accomplish on the site. The next section would be core features for phase 1. That is, if you've identified in your pre-proposal meeting that there are some things that they're wanting that would be best left to a phase 2. So in this section, you're going to want to break down the actual functionality you're building, organized by logical groupings. But again, keeping this at a very high level at this point. You certainly don't want to expose your entire solution here. This is the meat of what you're delivering. Be specific enough that you can estimate from it and the client can validate it, but not so specific that you're giving away the solution. The next section is design direction. Capture the look, feel, and personality they want for the site, including any color preferences, inspiration sites, or key messaging. This gives your designer direction, or you as the designer, without boxing them into specifics too early. If you had future considerations for a phase 2, you'd also want to list those. You'll want to document features that they mention that aren't happening in this phase but might come later. This acknowledges their ideas while also keeping them out of the scope for the current project. Your first defense against, but we talked about that, scope creep. Timeline. State when the project starts, when they need it launched, and how long you estimate it will take. Keep it simple. Detailed project schedules come later. You're also going to want to give them a range or a ballpark figure based on the conversation as your budget. This manages expectations before you send the formal proposal and helps avoid sticker shock later. We always start with a range. We never, ever get too specific about the estimate, especially at this point. Your technical requirements. Here you'll want to list any behind-the-scenes technical considerations like hostings, migrations, integration, security needs, or ongoing maintenance. These often get forgotten, but can significantly impact your scope and the cost of the project. You'll also want to include success criteria. Define what done and successful look like, but you need to do this in concrete, measurable terms. This becomes your acceptance criteria, how you'll both know that the project met the expectation. The next section you'll include is a project approach. Outline the major phases of how you'll execute the project from discovery through launch. This shows your process and sets the expectations about what happens next. You're also going to want to list who the decision makers are. It's so important to identify who needs to approve things and who doesn't. This prevents delays from waiting on people who don't actually have the decision-making authority. And if you've been told that it's a committee, you need to really press the client to identify one person who makes the final decision when there is a conflict of ideas. You'll also want to go ahead and tell them what the next steps are, exactly what happens next after they validate the brief. This keeps your momentum going and makes it clear what you need from them and what they should expect from you. And then the final section is risk mitigation. Address the potential risks and how you're going to handle them, including your change control process. This demonstrates you've thought ahead and have systems to keep the project on track. Now, every single website development project on the planet has at least one risk, and that is, especially if you're letting the client do the content, that the client doesn't deliver the content on time, or any other activity that the client has to carry out that they don't do it on time. That is always a risk, and you need to have mitigation. What are you going to do in the event that that happens? And in most cases, the answer is invoke your change control process. I know that seems like a lot, and it would take forever if you were trying to do this by hand. But the good news is you don't have to. You don't have to worry about any of that. If you follow the process that I'm going to lay out for you, AI does the heavy lifting. So here's the overall process. First, you're going to record the pre-proposal meeting. Now, you can use any kind of tool that you want to. I have used claude.ai in the past, but there are a ton more out there that you can use. Just Google it. You'll find one that works for you. All it needs to be able to do is transcribe the content of your meeting, whether you hold that meeting in person, over a Zoom call, or over the phone. Then you're going to upload that transcript to your AI large language model of choice, whether that's ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, whichever one that you prefer. It doesn't really matter. Although I believe that Claude does the best job at this sort of task. And then you're going to ask AI with a specific prompt to create you a project brief. And that's what we're going to demonstrate next. Then you're going to take that project brief and validate the brief with the client. So now I'm going to show you the process, and this starts with uploading the transcript of your meeting to AI, presuming that you've already recorded it, you've looked at the transcript, you've edited it to take out all the chit-chat, and you're going to now upload that into AI. So let's get started with the demo. Here I am inside claude.ai, and I'm going to attach my transcripts to this chat. And then I'm going to ask this. Please create a project brief for the client to ensure we got all the details right. Please include all the relevant information in the format of a standard project brief for a website. Now, your prompt can be as simple as that, or you can put more details in here if there's specific headings you want to use and things like that. But we're just going to do this generic prompt today, so you can see even with this simple prompt, you're going to get a fabulous project brief. So let's see what Claude can give us. So what did that take? Like 3 minutes? I mean, less than 3 minutes. And it did a great job. Y'all look at this. You've got your project overview, your current situation, project goals, target audience, core features, course delivery, payment and access, content management, email marketing, student data migration, design direction, future considerations for phase 2, the timeline, the budget, technical requirements, success criteria, project approach, decision makers, next steps, risk mitigation, and then a call to action asking the client to review it. So I'm going to copy this into a Word document, make some edits to it probably, and then create a PDF to send to the client for their validation. We're not calling it approval. We're calling it validation that we got everything correct that we discussed in the meeting. And then this will go a long way in helping us create the next piece of our estimate for this project. So there you have it. One document that takes about 10 minutes to create with AI and goes a long way towards potentially solving the 2 biggest problems that are your headaches: estimating projects precisely and getting a hold on scope creep before you even start. Look, I spent years doing this the hard way or skipping it all entirely. I was spending hours and hours trying to capture everything from my notes. And now with AI, what used to take me 2 to 3 hours now takes just a few minutes, about the same time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. And that's not an exaggeration. But here's the thing, you actually have to do it. I know it just seems like one more step in an already complicated process, but trust me, this is the step that makes everything after it way easier. Your proposals will be created faster, your estimates will be more precise, and you'll look more professional. Your clients will be impressed. And most importantly, you'll be starting your projects with clarity instead of chaos. So after you finish watching this video, record your next pre-proposal meeting. Run that transcript through AI, like I just showed you, and send that brief to your client for validation. Just try it once. I promise you'll wonder how you ever worked without it. Now, in the next video in this series, I'm going to show you how to take this project brief and create a visual sitemap that you can also get the client to validate to make sure you're moving in the right direction when it comes to content activities. Because knowing what pages you're building is kind of important when you're trying to figure out how much time and money this thing is going to take. And if you found this video helpful and you want to help other folks in our industry with the same thing, because that's what I love about the web development community is that we all seem to want to help each other. So gently hit the like button, subscribe if you want to, so that you'll get notified of the next video. And if you've got any questions at all about creating a project brief with AI, drop them in the comments below. And if you haven't already, you may want to watch the first video in this series where I give you the high-level overview of the entire process of estimating with AI. Thanks for watching, and until I see you again, stay productive, stay strong, always keep learning, and remain forever grateful, and I'll see you next time.